The Bob Murphy Show, episode 407.
There's a tidal wave coming. What you gonna do?
Get ready for another episode of The Bob Murphy Show, the podcast promoting free markets, free minds, and grateful souls. It's your source for commentary and interviews conducted by a Christian and economist. Now here's your host, Bob Murphy.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Bob Murphy Show. Today I am speaking with Connor Boyack. It was a very interesting discussion. I had jotted down some notes about what we were going to talk about, and we did hit those, but we also went on some side quests, as it were, and I think it's going to be something you'll enjoy. Connor is the founder of the Libertas Network, which is involved in all sorts of activities, spreading liberty and educating the next generation. And he does go through with more specifics about all the various things they're in during the conversation, so I'll defer the full exposition to his version of it. But in particular, Connor is the creator or co-creator of the Tuttle Twins book series that I'm sure many of you have heard about. And in addition to the books, they have now launched the Tuttle Twins Academy, and that is an online educational series that has various courses, one of which is an economics course, and that happens to be taught by yours truly. So, of course, amongst the other things that I'm hoping you get out of this discussion that I'm going to have with Connor here in a moment is that you go check out the Tuttle Twins Academy. There's no commitment. You know, you can go ahead and peruse and see some sample content without signing up for it. And I believe that, you know, they got a full money back guarantee, that sort of thing. So last thing I'll mention, if you do check it out, and the material I recorded for them, I have not done elsewhere, right? So that's new stuff if you're homeschoolers or whatever, and you want to go check out some of the content there that, yeah, there's things I did for that course that I haven't done elsewhere. But if you do check it out because of this, please use the link in the show notes page, right? So go to bobmurphyshow.com/407 and use that link so that I, get a little something for the effort. Okay, folks, here's my discussion with Connor Boyack. Connor, welcome to the Bob Murphy Show.
Thanks for having me.
So we're going to get into all things Libertas related, especially the Tuttle Twins, as most people are familiar with that. But before we do, I like to do these things somewhat of a origin story. So I know, for example, you used to be like a website guy for, I believe, Tom Woods, and then I'm pretty sure he recommended you to me, and that's how that's who you were in my life and Tom's, and then all of a sudden you turned into the powerhouse, and now I'm having you on my show as a guest. So can you just maybe share a little, like, how did you get into the libertarian space and end up that you were doing that kind of work?
So I was a computer nerd growing up, and I started making websites for various people who needed them, businesses, political candidates. And I was like, man, I can earn money doing this stuff. This was late 90s, just old school web stuff. And that was just the career I kind of fell into because that was my talent. But I found as time went on that I loved the technical challenge of it. I liked the people I often worked with. But a lot of the websites that I built or the apps that I was doing, I didn't care for because like it's some random company that I'm just prostituting myself to, right? And like, sure, I'll build you a website for your product that I think is stupid. And so I found myself kind of, dispassionate in a sense. At the same time, I was learning a lot about economics. I got hooked on Ron Paul back in like 2006. I just graduated college, and I kind of weaseled my way. I ended up getting working as kind of a freelancer for the Mises Institute, and then Tom, and then you and others. And I found like, man, I can use my talents to actually like further, causes I'm interested in. A few years of that went by, and my involvement in and passion for libertarian type of stuff just was almost like a full-time job on top of having a full-time web job. And I found such deep satisfaction in the kind of political activism and the policy and all of the stuff that I was working on. And so that's what led me to start Libertas 2011. And at the time, it was the only vision of it was like a state-based think tank. I had moved to Utah from California, and so I started a state-based think tank to focus on policy reform here. Of course, that's grown and evolved quite a bit since. But basically, that was for me figuring out a way how to monetize libertarian education and promotion, and how to be involved in these ideas professionally. So my web development past was actually very helpful as I built an organization to do a lot of technical stuff and build our website and so forth. So for me, it was really just about developing some talents that I can then use in the service of a higher good that I found more passion in.
If you don't mind me asking, like, was there ever any projects, like someone wanted you to build a website or something that you just looked at and like, no, I don't want to help you, I don't know what, supply the CIA, or I'm making stuff up, but you get what I'm saying?
No, fortunately, I never had any crises of conscience like that. It was mostly just, I felt like it was wasted energy, right? Like I was spending all this time building stuff that I felt like was just kind of meh. Like this company sucks, or I don't really care about them.
Right.
And so I was often picking up volunteer projects, and just doing things on the side that I felt like were actually doing some good. So more it was me just wanting to say, like, life is short. I have some talents. I want to figure out how to use them in a way that will actually do some good and make an impact. So ultimately that led me to abandoning the profession entirely. But in the meantime, in that kind of span of a few years, it was a great transition for me to kind of get over to this side of things. Yeah.
So you actually really did do the non-ironic version of, I've made jokes before along the, riffing on the conventional, aphorism saying, hey, if you get into libertarian activism, you'll never work a day in your life. So
too true.
Okay. So that's great. So the big thing is the Tuttle twins. Now, forgive me, because it might sound patronizing, but I mean this as a compliment, that, I knew of Tuttle Twins series and people didn't talk about it. And I think I had a few volumes. But then, I don't know, I think I was on your email list or something, but you blasted out and talking about your distribution numbers, and I was floored. So maybe just for the benefit, in case some of my listeners have known about you guys for years, but don't realize how big this has become, can you maybe just give some stats as to just the scope of the Tuttle Twins series?
Well, when most of the hardcore libertarians learned about us, it was probably early on, right? We were doing the books based on Bastiat and iPencil and The Creature from Jekyll Island and so forth. And when you look at those early years, so we started in 2014. Let's go all the way through 2019. So that's 6 years inclusive of the of 14 and 19. In those 6 years, keep in mind, we are self-published. This was just a fun little side project, no big vision, no big whatever. We sold a total across 6 years of about 750,000 books. We were very proud of that across that time. In 2020 alone, one single year, we sold 1.3 million books, more than double of the entire past 6 years. And so we've just, since COVID, everyone's a homeschooler all of a sudden for a brief period of time. People are freaking out, like, what happened to the country that I was, I guess, taking for granted, and, what's going on. So that really drew a lot of people. It was kind of one of those things like when preparation meets opportunity.
Right.
We had just been plunking along doing this for a while, and then all of a sudden we were like the right product for the right time for all these families. So now total we've...
Can I ask you, like, is that for sure a big chunk of what happened was that people switched to home? I mean, I know they literally had to homeschool in the sense that the schools were closed, but did some make the switch? In other words, it wasn't like the schools that were doing at-home learning were then assigning Tuttle Twins. It was like parents who took over.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. It was more just parents like, oh, okay, I'm on my own, at least for a few weeks. Or frankly, many parents stuck with homeschooling or did micro schools and what at the time were called pandemic pods, right? So now we've got, we've sold over 6 million books. I think we're inching towards 6.5 million now. There's over 30 titles in the series. We've got books from toddlers to teens and everything in between. We've, of course, built out a number of other things. We have a cartoon with Angel Studios. We have the Academy that you've been involved with for teens. We've got curricula and a game and a podcast and everything else. So really, it's just become a content engine to bring these kind of libertarian free market ideas in a very accessible way. Yes, for kids, but frankly, also a lot of their parents as well.
Okay, great. So as I told you before we hit record here, I am going to, in case you may have had to tell the story a million of times before, but we're going to have to do it a million and first time here. Can you just explain a little bit, like, at what point did you hit upon, why don't we do a book for kids? And then how did you, like, is it, we wanted to appeal to boys and girls, so let's have a brother and a sister, stuff, like things like that, just for people who are into this, so they can get a little bit behind the scenes, director's cut, commentary.
Yeah, here's the behind the scenes that your audience will appreciate. So Elijah is my partner and our illustrator for the Tuttle Twins. Mm-hmm. He worked on the Ron Paul 2012 campaign. You'll recall some of the kind of animated commercials, the really high budget, really nice commercials they did. Mitt Romney kind of going ha 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 and like vaccinating people, and like there were some of those fun videos. Elijah was heavily involved in those videos. He had been a Ron Paul guy for years. We met at Freedom Fest, I think, for the first time in like 2011. So we were both Ron Paul guys, both had young kids. We saw in one another like compatible talent. It was one of these things of like, hey, maybe one day we'll work together on something. Like not so explicitly stated, but kind of like this vibe of like, hey, maybe there's something here. And for me, what was happening at the time was I started Libertas Institute in 2011, again, as a state-based think tank. My kids at the time were very young. And I found myself, as a year or two went into the think tank, I'm fighting, eminent domain, or I'm, police militarization stuff, and we're doing all these things here in Utah. And I found myself wanting to share with my kids what dad does for work, right? Like I didn't want to be like, I type on computers and I make phone calls. I wanted to like share the substance. And one day I went on Amazon and I'm like, libertarian books for kids, or free markets for kids, and there was just nothing. This was 2013. And so that's what kind of galvanized the idea. And Elijah and I had been kind of now teasing this idea, like, maybe something like a kid's book. What about the law? The Law by Bostiat was very instrumental in both of our intellectual development with these ideas. And so it kind of like these different things converged all at once, where we're kind of like, all right, right idea, right people, right time, let's do a book. There was, again, no grand vision. There was literally no vision of a series. It was just, hey, this would be fun. Let's do a kid's book together. And we put it out. Here's more behind the scenes your team will appreciate, your viewers, listeners will appreciate. We launch in 2014 at Freedom Fest, thinking, here's all these libertarians.
Sure.
They know about the original book. They'll get this for their kids and their grandkids. Of course, no one knows who Tuttle Twins is or who me and Elijah are. We're in like the armpit of the dark corner in the convention hall. People are walking past us. Meanwhile, we had just set up our website.
There's guys selling gold coins to your left. And,
right, exactly. Come invest in Borneo apricot farms and all this random stuff that we always have there. And so I'm sitting behind the booth. I think Elijah was off talking to someone. I'm sitting behind the booth. No one's walking by. I get an alert on my phone, and it's a notification that someone placed an order. I was getting an email notification, say, every, few hours of someone buying this new book that we had just recently launched. I pull up the notification.
Can I stop you? Was it a print on demand, or did you have a batch printed up and then you were mailing?
We had a batch printed. Yeah, that's a good question. Okay. So we can get into the business side as much as you want, but we did, doing it through Libertas, we had existing capital that we could use to do a full print run of. I think at the time it was 5,000 books. They all went into my basement. I was packing all the books every night, taking them to the post office in the morning. So I pull up this notification behind the Freedom Fest booth. I scroll down, 50 copies. Someone ordered 50 copies of the book. Who is this person? I scroll down, Ron and Carol Paul, ordering one for all the grandkids. And I'm like, okay, there's our market signal. We're on to something. So, a lot of people were like, hey, you should do another book. And so it's very organic in the early days. Honestly, like when sales spiked during COVID, we realized, okay, we've really got to lean into this and stop treating it like a fun little side project. This needs to be a very strategic campaign that we invest in and scale up quickly. And that's what we've been doing in past years.
Okay, great. Just a little bit more on the creative, the fiction stuff, the universe you were building. Do you have any recollection of, like, it's the Tuttle Twins. They were clearly in the first book, but as the series goes, there's other people. Like, was their whole family? Like, did you know all the characters as of the first book, or did you start introducing them? And like, what was that process?
Yeah, that's
if you
been very
remember that.
organic. It's like, okay, here's a story where we could use an uncle. Let's now come up with an uncle. Yeah. So it's very much been like we'll build the plane as we're flying it in the air, which I think is fun. And we haven't run into any problems yet in terms of like retconning anything.
I was going to say, like, do you have like an archive, like where you have all the history and the family tree to make sure that, wait a minute, this would contradict what we said in episode 10?
Yes, we have an encyclopedia, especially now with doing multiple ages. So like in the teen fiction books, we aged them up to, I think, 15 years of age. And so in those books, they're older. So they, in remembering their childhood, have this backstory that in the children's books, we need to make sure that we're consistent with. So we do have kind of little encyclopedia of knowledge that we just try and consult. Like right now, for example, literally this morning, I was working on chapter 6 of our 3rd volume of our American history series that we're doing. And very similar thing. I'm having to go back and, volume 2. Okay, what did we say there? And what did they do? And the more we do, the more kind of interweaving there is like that we have to be careful with.
Okay, great. So what is the process at this point for a new volume in the series? Just do like readers send you stuff and you pick, or is it still you guys kind of, I mean, not that you have to do what the readers say, but you get what I'm saying, like the latest 4 or 5 you've done, has it been you thought of it or somebody suggested you thought, we should do that?
I would say, well, of course we've got now, toddler board books and we've got teen books and all of that, but talking maybe specifically about our children's books, which are what we're most known for, the kind of age 6 to 12 story books. Those books, for the vast majority of them, especially the last half, we have a long list of ideas, of course, readers submitted ideas, our own ideas. But these last many books that we've done in the series, we have 14 now in that series. We try and think of what is the message, what are the ideas that people need to hear about the most. So, for example, like right as and I should also remind your listeners, I think you know this, Bob, all of those books are kind of inspired by or based on libertarian classics. Of course, we talked about The Law, Creature from Jekyll Island, Economics in One Lesson, Road to Serfdom, all the rest. So as COVID kind of unfurled, we thought, okay, we need to do Bob Higgs's Crisis in Leviathan, because that's exactly what's going on right now, right? The government's going to grow because here's another crisis. And so we turned that into the Tuttle Twins and the Leviathan Crisis. And so we put that out like right as, things were scaling up. Then, of course, comes all the money that they're throwing at everyone, and they're printing up trillions of dollars and everything else. So then we're like, all right, now let's do human action. And let, that one was a doozy, trying to fit praxeology into a kid's book, right? But it's like, hey, it
was hard for me to break it down into a 300-page book for undergrad, so I could imagine.
Exactly. Yeah. Pictures help, fortunately. So that's more the take that we try and do is like, what are the messages that we feel would be very resonant right now with, now, granted, the other part of this is these ideas, as with the original books ours are inspired by, are kind of evergreen in a sense, right? Like we're just going to always have a high relevance to these ideas. But in terms of like the book launch and when we put it out, we try and figure out like what is most useful right now. That's kind of the process that we do.
Okay, interesting. You just reminded when you said the creature. I don't know if it was in the creature book or there was like the ABCs one. You know what I'm saying? Like it had like a concept that's with every letter of the alphabet.
Yep.
And it might have been that one. Because I think does this sound right to you that the yes. octopus is in that book too?
Yes.
As if for money?
So the ABCs of economics, and we've got we got like John Maynard Keynes for K, and we've got Q is quantitative easing.
Okay.
So we have the octopus, which of course comes from the original political cartoon when they were illustrating it, back in the early 1900s. And so that plays prominently in our books every time we're mentioning the Fed. And then also in our cartoon, we have an episode about what is called in the cartoon, the inflation monster. Similarly, it's this, big octopus going around changing prices. And so trying to kind of, keep it tied to some of the fun historical tie-ins.
Well, so the reason I bring that up is because I had a batch of your books, and my 5-year-old, he might have been 4 at the time, I don't remember. Yeah, he would have been 4. He's going through it, and we were reading, and I was showing him the stuff, and he was asking me about the octopus. So, folks, it's like the Federal Reserve is the octopus monster, and I was explaining what it was. Oh, that's what makes things more expensive, or I was trying to. Yeah. And then later, days later or something, I think he wanted me to get something on Amazon. And I said, oh, it's too expensive. And he was like, oh, did the octopus, like it just matter of factly, he's like, oh, it's that damn octopus, right?
I love it. That's awesome.
Okay. So maybe we could actually, before we leave that, why don't this probably is the right time to talk about the recent controversy where was it a school library? Can you just tell us that story? Yeah. It was pretty funny.
So it's a public library. This is is actually a library network, a network of public libraries in a conservative county in New York, Chemung County, and this county has voted Republican for like 2 or 3 decades. Their county, they call it a legislature. Their county governance is like majority Republican. So it's a predominantly conservative area of town. But of course, the libraries, like the schools, are mostly taken over by the left. Mm-hmm. And so there was a he/him pronoun library director guy at this library that took our Tuttle Twins books off the shelves. They had been either purchased or donated, I don't know which, but they had been on the shelves. Very well loved, because the librarian, part of their objection and why they removed the books was like, oh, they're in poor condition. To which we said in response, like, we will freely send you more. Like, don't take them off the shelves. But of course, the main reason that they were taking them off, hilariously, they said, and I'm not going to get this verbatim, but the gist was that our books were insufficiently inclusive to other perspectives, and therefore they were going to remove them from the shelves. Meanwhile, they've got books glorifying AOC and climate activism and LGBT everything, and so we put out an alert. It took us a little while. We knew of this story about a week before we published it, because we had to do some things behind the scenes to protect the source of the leak. So someone leaked us the email, and we didn't want them to get punished and whatnot. So once we were ready to go public, we shared it. We put it out on our email list. We have an email list of like 1 million people or so, and who've bought the books. And funny enough, I mean, not surprising, but a lot of people on our list who have bought the books who live in Chemung County, New York. And so they were perhaps among the more passionate, calling, the libraries and pushing back. So quickly the library relented. They in fact lied. I mean, of course, we had the email and we had some additional stuff and Can I ask, like,
to whom was that original email sent?
It was an internal email. So the person who leaked us the email was an employee of the library. And this was the district manager over multiple libraries that was kind of authorizing the removal. And so after the pushback, the canned statement that they started sending in reply to all the hordes of people that bombed them with emails, the canned reply was like, oh, no, this just got flagged for a standard review process, and, it'll soon be back on the shelves, which is total garbage, because the leaked email we had was very explicitly like, we are taking these down, and here's why. So the books are back. And of course, this reminds me, Bob, of, I don't know if you ever saw this, but a few years ago, CNN came after us. Someone wrote this op-ed, and it was an editorial type article at CNN. And they said that the Tuttle Twins was creating a right-wing children's education complex. And so it was this whole complaint. And literally because of CNN, in that weekend alone, we sold over 100,000 books because of same thing here. It's like everyone's learning about this censorship in New York, and we got it fixed. Yay. But also it just brought even more attention to the books, which was fun.
Well, there's a few lessons there. I mean, the one thing that's funny is I guess the one virtue, if you will, of government bureaucracy is they kind of do have to document, there has to be memos, you know what I mean? Because the people at the top want to keep some control over what their subordinates are doing. And so they kind of say, yeah, you got to report, you got to have procedures. And so, they can't just yank, they have to notify people, this is what we're doing, and give some rationale. So you had the smoking gun. That's good. I guess also too, it's heartening that there was somebody on the inside that was sympathetic and knew, oh, if I send it to these guys, and then you rush to the rescue with the cavalry and get them to,
The flip side of that, Bob, I would say, is how often do we not have someone on the inside and we're fed this fake narrative about what's really going on, or we simply don't know. I think about that in particular often, especially studying history and propaganda and everything. It's like, it's so difficult to think that we know what's actually going on right now when it's just all narrative and all smokescreen.
Well, if you don't mind just going off on this little side quest for a moment, because it's an interesting question. You know, people could ask me, like, for example, when I came out of grad school, you know, I was going to be a college professor for my life. And I just at the outset said, I can't work for a state school. I'm not saying other Austro-libertarians who do work for state schools, you're bad or something. I'm not saying, I just said, for me personally, I just thought it'd be like if I'm giving a talk somewhere about anarcho-capitalism and I say taxation is theft and some guy in the back raises and says, oh, but it's okay for the state to steal to pay your salary, right? Like, I just didn't see how I could recover from that besides like, yeah, I got to go, folks. See you later, you know?
Right.
And so anyway, that was just me. I just thought, how can I do that, right? But anyway, regardless of my personal thing, but then on the other hand, you know, and Walter Block debated me once on Tom's show about why he disagreed strongly with me and thought, no, that's a terrible message, Bob, for you to be communicating to young people. Like, we want to fill the schools, the public schools or the state-owned universities with our people and whatever. And so on something like this, or just in general, like, yeah, I don't want people going into the military, but if they are, it would be good if 95% of the Marines were all, you know, Bible-believing Christians who loved Ron Paul. You get what I'm saying? And so I'm just, anyway, what are your thoughts on that?
I worry in a sense about that because certainly it happens with teachers where they're predominantly left-leaning and it's kind of a captured audience. Sure, there's homeschoolers and micro schoolers and everything, but they control, you know, the vast majority of the intellectual development of the rising generation. So certainly it could be librarians in our case. I think about that with cops. I know many people who quit because of all the bureaucracy and all the restrictions and all the whatever, all the quotas of having to go harass people and ticket them. And, the military, of course, we've had a lot of like Ron Paulian, past members of the military who've quit because of all the, occupation and foreign adventurism and everything. So, yeah, it does lead you to question what happens when the good people, exit the system. It doesn't, the system's going to continue, at least in some respect, for some long period of time, and you can build your alternative institutions. I don't know. I am not one I don't want to be within the system because then you run into those problems. But then also, I appreciate those who are, where they feel that they can either reconcile that or that's their calling that they feel, that they're supposed to be doing. I do think we need, I'll give you an example on the think tank side of my work. Now we have a model that we call nail it, then scale it. So we'll nail a policy in Utah, we'll scale it to other states. So we work around the country using Utah as kind of our home base. And of course, in politics, you get your hands dirty very quickly because you're having to make compromises, concessions, forge an alliance with this legislator because you need their vote, but then they expect something from you later. And so you very quickly learn the large delta between this purist libertarian philosophy in a utopian sense, right? And then like trench warfare libertarianism of how do you actually, move things in your direction. And it's been very insightful. It's not been without its criticism over the years that I've had arrows, in my back of people who thought that I sold out this, cause or violated this principle or whatever. Yeah. But it does raise these questions of how do you work within the system to reform the system? Or, should you just abandon it entirely? I think that we need the people inside trying to reform it. I also think we need the bomb throwers on the outside to bring that external pressure. Different strokes for different folks, I guess.
Yeah, I not to be wishy-washy or to make it look like I refuse to take a stand. I agree with you. It's kind of like you need all of the above and that each component's more effective if they have that. Right. The purist on the outside who are laying down, here's what the correct thing is. In a perfect world, this is how things would be run. And then the pragmatists on the inside saying, well, we can't do that next Tuesday, but it's good that you are raising those issues. So now it'll make it easier for us to steer the ship, And I just to give a more recent example. So, yeah, I was a purist coming out of grad school and saying, I'm not working for a state school, period. By the way, in case people think I'm a hypocrite, I was at Texas Tech. But I really made sure that the way they paid me was through a private thing, and people can choose to believe me or not, but that is what happened. And so but more recently, I just recently co-wrote an op-ed with Mark Spitznagel saying, hey, if you're going to have tariffs, use them to reduce income tax rates and do this and that, you know what I mean? As opposed to just, nope, taxes are bad, end of story. Don't do, so maybe my 25-year-old self would have seen that op-ed and said, "Oh, what a sellout this guy is! Are you trying to get into cocktail parties with Republicans?" Or so.
Well, we all have our decision. Frankly, yeah. I mean, gosh, there's so many side quests we could go on here. I'll just simply say that, I've never been a member of the Libertarian Party. I don't participate in all the infighting. I feel like the purists and the philosophizers and everything, while I enjoy a good debate, if you could harness all that energy that is expended on the, I don't know, just the more esoteric parts of our movement and the conceptual theoretical parts, and if you could apply that, right, and actually like go engage with people, boots on the ground and electoral process, like we could make a lot of change if you took even a fraction of the libertarian infighting that exists. I've always been kind of turned off just because I see it as a waste of time. And so for me, I see what I'm up to as like applied libertarianism. How do you take the concepts and translate them so people can put them into practice in their lives? And that looks messy and it looks different, but I think it's far more rewarding than just staying up at 30,000 feet.
Right. Yeah, I agree. And like I said, I think some of it might be a function of age too, that maybe it makes sense. It's like a natural life cycle. Yeah, when you're young, be super pure and see how far that gets you.
Realistic, right.
And then you get some feedback from the environment. And maybe it depends on the situation. Maybe in certain cases that, the right thing is for everyone to go on a hunger strike or whatever. And in other cases, it's like, go ahead and just really campaign for this person that's going to be the lesser of two evils, or whatever. So you get the idea. I guess for the Libertarian Party, you ever hear my joke is when people would be pushing them and I would say, hey, vote Libertarian, vote for the least of three evils. Okay. It was a good grammar lesson too. The kids like it. It's good for them. All right. So you alluded to maybe we don't need to do an infomercial for it. I will have folks, given you information on how to do this in the show notes page and at the front end. But I recently was in beautiful Salt Lake, and I don't say that facetiously, folks. It was when I had to, for example, Connor, when I had to walk from the hotel to the studio, or when I had to go from the hotel to the studio, when I saw how gorgeous it was, I walked back, and it was like, I don't know, 4 miles or something, just because there's mountains. I was taking pictures with my phone, just texting my family, like, this. I'm just walking back to the hotel. Like, I was on a postcard. It was amazing. So anyway, but, and I did an economics series for you guys. So can you just maybe talk about that broader project, of which my contribution was just one element?
Absolutely. So this is called the Tuttle Twins Academy. You got to realize, as we go out around the country, frankly, internationally now, and we sell these books, the average age is like 9. And so we skew younger, which I think is awesome. That gives us a lot of time with these kids to be building on their education. But of course, we've been doing this for a decade. So we have a lot of kids who are now certainly young adults, but tons of teens. So there's been a lot of demand for like, hey, our teens want to go deeper. They want to learn some of these ideas more. That's the Tuttle Twins Academy. So we take a bunch of smart people like yourself. We sit them down through multiple lessons, they record, but then we animate a lot of it so it's interesting for teens to watch, just a little bit more visually interesting. So we've got stuff on civics and finance and econ, like your course. We're adding all kinds of stuff, persuasive writing, philosophy, entrepreneurship. And so ultimately the vision is, certainly there's the more like econ and political and history kind of topics, but also broader, like we're doing courses on mindset, right? And things that can like empower these teens to think and act well, to not only apply these, ideas of freedom in their lives, but many other helpful ideas that are kind of liberty tangential, perhaps. So that's the Tuttle. It's TuttleTwins.com/academy. And so basically, for anyone listening, if you have teenagers, this could be, if they're in school, this could be like a little summer school type of thing. It works great as a homeschool type of program. It's very flexible, supplemental, however you want to adapt it. But the vision is, let's get teens learning a little bit more deeply on these ideas from a bunch of different instructors with some visually interesting stuff to make the information be received a little bit more easily.
Okay, great. And I imagine it's great for homeschoolers, but also you can just in general, even if someone's going to conventional school, if you're into this stuff, go ahead and check these courses out.
Because they're not learning a lot of this very well through school. Right. And if they're being exposed to these ideas, they're often quite opposite versions of the ideas. So it's a palate cleanser, perhaps, for any of the kids who are in public school.
Yeah, definitely. Since I brought it up, I'm curious, do you just how gorgeous it was? I mean, I really do think if I were a young single guy, and I'm blessed right now that my income I can largely derive so long as I have internet access, I might have seriously considered moving to Salt Lake. I couldn't get over how gorgeous it was. Anyway, somebody said recently, I saw it on social media, they said Salt Lake is what people think Denver's going to be like, and they realize no, Denver's not. It's Salt Lake City. But where I'm going with this question is there a push? Like, do you tell people, hey, if you're libertarian, why don't you, let's get, if more of you moved over here, then we could get a little thing, kind of like how the New Hampshire people do? Or is that not your...
I'm actually speaking at their, what's that, Pork Fest, their event in a couple months out in New Hampshire.
Yeah, I'll be there too.
As well. Oh, okay, cool. No, I've never really had that message. Utah, honestly, is great for raising a family. Mm-hmm. I'm from San Diego originally. I tell people that I got out of California back in the days when you could actually rent a U-Haul truck to go in one direction. Now that's much more difficult to do. But no, I settled here in Utah. Your story is funny to me because you're like the 8th person that I've heard that from recently. I hired a guy from back east, and we flew him out to Utah to come meet some of our folks. A lot of our team is, in fact, the vast majority of our team is remote and works all over the country. But we've got our little headquarters here. So I fly this guy out. I pick him up at the airport. And it was like a kid in a candy shop. Mm-hmm. I mean, he was just like blown away by how close and how big the mountains are. Mm-hmm. And it's a fun, awesome place. To your point, though, no, and I don't know why. I've never really had that vibe of like, you should live here, you should move there. I support the Free State folks in trying to do what they're doing. They've got a lot of seats in the legislature. There's a lot of libertarian, it's cool what they're doing. I support it. But I guess I see my role more as like Johnny Appleseed, like slinging seeds at the mountainside to sprout stuff wherever they can grow. So live wherever you want. I'm going to bring these ideas to you and then hopefully better your life along the way.
Okay, yeah. And you just reminded me that was the thing, because when I was there, I mean, it was literally snow-capped mountains, folks. It was a weird, like almost optical illusion where it looked like you could just touch it, but yet you actually couldn't. But also you could walk around, and it was, very pleasant, atmosphere, even though you could go see snow-capped mountains on the horizon. It was amazing. But you also weren't just in some rustic cabin in the middle of nowhere. It was, you had your multiplex movie theater that was also within walking distance of the hotel and things. So it was
what I didn't tell you, perhaps, Bob, when you were here. So I'm of course in my office now, and if I look out my window here to the right, I can see still the snow-capped mountains, and then off to my left, there's more. These are more hills, really big hills, kind of mountain-esque, but maybe 2 miles away from my office on the other side, where these big hills are, that's where the NSA is. They have a massive facility there, and that is their storage facility. So they have other sites that intercept data, and then they route all the data here to Utah. And all you can see when you drive by, I always give it the middle finger salute when I'm driving by this place. All you can see is one story, a bunch of one-story buildings, but they go super deep in the ground. And it's all these computers that are down, in the earth to be cooler. And when when they started, gosh, this was, I don't know, 10 years ago, when they were building the facility. Oh gosh, more. I think it's been like a dozen years now. Anyways, we ran a bill in Utah because we wanted to shut this place down. We thought it was ridiculous. The Snowden leaks had just come out, and we were learning more about what was going on. And so we filed a bill in the legislature. It got national news, and I was on Tucker Carlson's show back when he was on like Fox and Friends. So we were doing all these like national interviews. The bill was because it's on federal land, right? Like what can a state do to tell the feds what they can do on their own land? By the way, 2/3 of Utah is owned by the feds. Most of the western states is predominantly owned by the federal government, which is ridiculous. So it's on federal land, but we're like, they need our water to cool all of those computers. So we filed a bill to shut down the water and to just deny them access. As you might imagine, the bill went nowhere, and the feds, squeezed the arm of the legislative leadership. But anyways, yes, snow-capped mountains on one side, and then we've got friggin', NSA just a few miles away. So kind of a balance in some weird sense.
Okay, that's great. So did the 10th Amendment Center pick that up and run with it? Like, did they include that in their greatest hits or so? Because I know I had been aware of that, and I thought that was amazing and what a great idea, but I didn't think I heard that from you. So I don't know if others.
It's quite possible
Okay.
they did. Before I started Libertas, back when the 10th Amendment Center had a more chapter-based model, I was
Right.
actually the Utah chapter leader for the 10th Amendment Center. But this particular bill was after I left that, started Libertas. But of course, I was still chummy with Bolden and Mike Mahari and those guys. And so, quite possible that they should. I will tell you, Bob, before we get off of this little another side quest, I have this vision that I've never followed through on. Right next to the NSA is this like farmland, and I want to lease or buy a small plot of land and erect a massive tower and literally create an Eye of Sauron, so that all across this valley people have this like visual representation of what that NSA facility represents, and have like a glowing orange thing cast down on the community below. And anyways, it's just a crackpot idea, but I get a big, yeah.
I mean, I'm saying, so that's hilarious. I'm glad you said that. But what's, just to be, I'm saying this half tongue in cheek, but then to circle back to, on the one hand, that's great. And suppose you really, did do that. That'd be funny for sure. But is it conceivable that because of that, over time, that would mean the only people who kept working there were like, yeah, that is what we are, as opposed to, well, hey, I need a job, and who might feel squeamish about what, this doesn't seem right, and
right.
You see what I'm saying? So
yeah, we run into the same polarization issue we were talking about earlier. Yeah, no, you're probably not wrong, although I do question the morality of anyone who works for something like NSA. But then again, you got all these goons at the TSA and others that, like you say, probably just, I need a job and it has benefits, and that's why people sign up for the military. It's often not about
I got to tell you this. Yeah, I got to tell you this story since we're telling stories. And I am watching the clock here, Connor. Don't worry. So I was at some event. There were a bunch of people there, including G. Edward Griffin, and then a bunch of us, were flying. It was a place that the airport was small that catered to this area, and so we were all going to the airport at the same time after the conference is over, and we're going through security. And I won't say her name because I don't know if she wants me saying it, but there was this woman in our group who was really into, like, naturopathy and things like this, and was very much against the body scanners were relatively new still. Like, this was still a hot topic that libertarian types and agorists and those kind of people were really pushing against. And so we all opted out, and we're waiting for the search because it's there's not that many people around, so we all have to wait in line because there's only like one a male and female that can pat us down and everything. And we're all sitting there, and then some of the people were kind of like had snide remarks for us, but one of the TSA people was a woman, and she, I don't remember if she was visibly pregnant or not, but she was talking to the girl that was in our group, and the girl in our group was not like, oh, you're the enemy, why are you, would you have worked for Hitler? She wasn't, her thing was like just trying to educate them, like, oh no, the reason we're opting, because what happened is her buddy, her coworker, was telling us, no, this is safe, and they told us this is, what I mean? And then our girl was just arguing the facts with them, but she wasn't being confrontational. She was just matter of factly. And so then, like I said, the coworker, the TSA lady kind of pulls her aside and says, is it because I'm pregnant and I don't know? And so she's like, oh yeah, here. She's like, pulling out a piece of paper and giving her websites to go check out. So I'm just saying, who knows what happened? That maybe that lady just kept working there anyway because, hey, it's a job and whatever, and I got a kid coming. But my point was just, I had seen different, because I'd been with other groups where the guy, with a more aggressive male guy who was like real sarcastic, and like, when the guy's patting him down, making
it's
jokes
not
about
gay if it's TSA.
Yeah, exactly. I was trying to think of a way to, yes, exactly. and that didn't go over very well. Like, I don't think that guy walked away becoming a libertarian and going to listen to Tom Woods or something.
Which, Bob, can I riff off of this briefly?
Yes,
this
please.
is such a powerful thing for libertarians to think through. I've done a number of interviews with like different libertarian podcasts, and one of them was a guy with a background in marketing. And so we honed in on this very question of like, how do you get people to, it's basically like how to win friends and influence people, right? Like, we've got these ideas. We feel like we have this moral high ground. We believe in that these ideas and principles are true. I have found no better way to spread these ideas than to reduce it and simplify it and package it in a children's format. If you go to the average guy on the side of the road and you give him The Road to Serfdom, be like, hey, this book will help you learn, how to be a build a prosperous life and how to, how markets work and everything. Most adults are going to resist. I'm too busy. I don't need that. I'm fine. I'm good. But if instead you say, hey, I want to help you teach your kids how the world works and how they can, be successful in their life, most parents are going to be like, okay, yeah, I'm interested. So to me, it's been very gratifying to see that we've kind of latched onto this way to very effectively spread these ideas, not by beating people over the head, not by boisterous activism and, like a prophet in the wilderness calling everyone to repentance and then you get killed, right? Instead, it's like this very inviting, family-friendly dynamic. In fact, so much so that we last fall, we did a full rebrand. So now we're called the Libertas Network, and all of our different things like Tuttle Twins are underneath or part of the Libertas Network. And the whole vibe, the whole focus of Libertas Network is to reach, teach, and engage families. Let's create lasting change by bringing our ideas to the family, showing how they can be relevant at the family dinner table for discussions, getting them talking about them, getting them engaged and actually involved, like, different projects we have that get them not just reading, but then applying the ideas. That to me is how we spread the ideas, by showing mom and dad how these ideas are actually meaningful and beneficial to the lives of their family members and are going to help them. If you market libertarian ideas in that way, man, they take root. And sometimes we don't even say that they're libertarian ideas. We're just saying, hey, this can help you succeed in business, or this will, and then the ideas flourish quite a lot more so if we were just to be so like direct, like you were saying with the TSA example.
Okay, great. Can you maybe just outline, sketch, what else do you guys have going on besides just what we've talked about in terms of the Libertas Network?
Okay, so we talked about the think tank, which is Libertas Institute. Tuttle Twins, we have a project called the Children's Entrepreneur Market. That is a mouthful, children'sentrepreneurmarket.com. And think of these like farmers markets, but run entirely by the kids. So mom and dad can help set up the booth and take down the booth. But for 3 hours, kids run the show, real products, real money. We're going to have over 100,000 kids participating this year across the country. So we're rapidly scaling that program. Of course, it's fun to earn some spending money and, have fun on a Saturday morning. What we're really trying to do is, have these kids learning the principles of free enterprise in a very real and applied way. The average kid, by the way, makes about $150. Needless to say, our retention rate is very high because these kids are like, oh, I want to do that again, buy some more Pokemon cards or whatever. So that's another project. We recently acquired a company many of your listeners will be familiar with called Praxis. They've been around for about a decade. We've been supporters and friends of theirs for a long time. We just acquired them fully. For those who don't know, that helps young adults secure well-paying jobs, entry-level jobs, without needing a college degree. The difference this makes for the average Praxis participant is $250,000 because you are foregoing the payment of 4 years of tuition, college tuition, but you're also getting 3.5 to 4 years of income that your same age peers are not getting because they're sitting in a classroom. And so when you compare all of that up, it's
or they might not even be sitting in the classroom. They might be with a hangover back at the dorm. So.
Absolutely. So that's Praxis. We just launched a public polling firm called Overton Insights. So we're going to be building that out in the months to come. That's just going to do public opinion polling for think tanks and values aligned groups. So that's I think I hit everything. But these projects ultimately are all trying, even with our think tank, it's like, how do we change the laws that are going to best help families thrive? How do we teach the kids in the family? How do we get the family engaged in the civic process so that they can help defend their freedoms? And it's not just a few libertarian activists, but it's an army of families who have been reading about these ideas, right? So everything that we're doing is trying to say, like, you probably heard this quote, politics is downstream of culture.
Yep.
It's, I agree, but culture is downstream of the family. And few in our movement have really ever focused on families. A lot focused on politics, fewer focused on culture. But our niche where we're really trying to build it out is the longest, biggest transformative change I think we can have is if we get our ideas into the family living room for discussion and application. So that's what we are all about.
Okay, well, that's great. I guess one real quick last one here, last thing I'll ask you, I promise, Connor, is I'm on your email list, and I think this is tied into the Praxis acquisition, that your email, I think it was literally today, was just, you had somebody's screenshot or a screenshot of somebody's tweet about it was about ChatGPT is ruining college or something, and the person's commentary was, it's interesting to ask, like, why are kids cheating? Because, you wouldn't expect Buddhist monks to cheat on their meditation or artists to cheat on their work, and yet we just take it for granted that kids cheat at school. So isn't there some kind of disconnect? So anyway, do you want to just, as we close here, give how you reacted to that, and the relevance?
Long before AI, I cheated in school when I was younger. It was all about the grade. It was like, you will not be allowed to get your driver's license if you don't have this level of GPA, and I, as a budding libertarian, not knowing at the time, but I was very resistant to that very kind of just coercive approach. Now, fast forward, I love learning. I love education. I love the acquisition of knowledge, but the biggest failure I see in our school system is that content is being taught without context. Mm-hmm. And so it's just memorize this stuff, learn this stuff. It's going to be on the test. You must do this if you want to get your diploma or your degree. But when there's context, meaning here's why this is relevant for your life. Here's how this can help you. Here's why this issue from 250 years ago in your history class actually is relevant to what is happening today in our world. When we make the content contextual and meaningful to the individual, then it's not drudgery, it's not homework, it's not an assignment, it's passion, it's curiosity. And so that, to me, like with the advent of AI, it's like, look, it's going to be all the more easy in a very draconian, coercive education system to quote unquote cheat and find those shortcuts. We need to move, I think, to a model where kids, young adults in college understand how these ideas can, benefit and bless their lives and help empower them. And when we frame it the right way to be towards a particular end that they have, a goal that they have, then I think no longer, they're not even going to consider cheating, because they're going to realize, oh, that creates value for me. Now I understand how it creates value for me. Let me go do that in the right way because I actually want it to create value for me. I just think we don't sell the vision of education very well to kids when we have this very kind of authoritarian model. Anyways, I could go off on that rant for a while, but that's kind of the background behind the email, is to say, like, there's a better way to do education. And I think we need to have a broader conversation as a society about what that looks like.
Okay, well, great. And you folks are certainly doing your part in helping to give people viable alternatives. So, folks, my guest has been Connor Boyack. Connor, thanks so much for everything you've been doing and for giving me the opportunity to help you with an economics course. And we just encourage all the listeners to consume your products.
Well, thank you, Bob. And next time we get you out of these mountains, we should get you on the mountains and going skiing. So we'll have to arrange that. Thanks again for participating and for inviting me here.
Well, sure thing. And also, I do want to go check out the NSA. So,
okay.
All right. Thanks so much, Connor. Thanks to everyone for tuning in. We'll see you next time.
You've just experienced another episode of The Bob Murphy Show, the podcast promoting free markets, free minds, and grateful souls. For more information and to subscribe to this podcast, visit bobmurphyshow.com.